All right, everybody, you are in the right place for Side Chat this week. And as we talked a little bit about last week, this week's Side Chat and the Side Chats going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, as we're sort of experimenting with the format, are going to be in a new format. The way they used to work is used to be a live webinar for 30 minutes and then a 30-minute Twitter chat on the hashtag Side Chat. However, what we're going to do for the foreseeable future and for this week is instead of using that format where you have to be in the same time, in the same place, you have to jump on Twitter and all that sort of stuff to take part, we've actually moved over to a Facebook group format. So the group format is facebook.com/group/side chat. I'm sure Brittany will be tweeting that out and sharing it on our Twitter and our Facebook pages this week. But the way it works is that I'll be recording a webinar each week, a short webinar full of data about a specific topic. I'll be recording that every week. We'll be posting that to YouTube and then posting it on over to the Facebook group. On the Facebook group, of which we have over 500 members already, we'll be having an awesome discussion about that topic that week. This week's topic is going to be social calls to action. Of course, one of my favorite topics, and if you've been listening to Side Chat for any amount of time, you know that I always say that every week is my favorite topic, but really, this is absolutely one of my favorite topics. I'm going to get into that more in a little bit, but I kind of wanted to explain, I explained quite a bit last week. I don't want to do as much explanation as I did last week this week, but I do want to explain the new format, why we chose the new format, the new Facebook group format over the previous Twitter chat format a little bit, since we had some questions over the last week or so. Basically, we ask people, side chatters and folks who are interested in side chat, what we could do to make side chat better, right? How could we make your experience better? How could we make it easier for you to get stuff out of side chat? How could we make it easier for you to participate in side chat? And one of the most common responses we got, especially from people in time zones outside of the US, right, was that 2 p.m. on Friday was the kind of rough time. Everybody in the world can't be together at one time. Some people are sleeping, some people are eating dinner. It's really early in the morning for some other folks. And so breaking away from that set time and set day format allows us to reach a wider audience. And that's really the key for one of the other big reasons for why we made the switch. Every week I like to say, I am not as smart as all of us, meaning, half the part of side chat is the data that I present, and I like to think that it's interesting and useful and intelligent, but the reality of the situation is that it's the discussion about that data that comes after the data, after I show it to you guys, and then you guys go off and talk about it with us from HubSpot, with myself, with Brittany, with Elliot. But it's that community that really provides the best, most awesome value, right? Because as a community, we are way smarter together than any of us are individually. And by using a Facebook group, what we're able to do is take that super intelligent, super smart, super active community and extend it beyond just the 30 minutes. On 2:30 on every Friday. And we're able to extend it out throughout the entire week so that people can share their own, topics, their own content, their own information that relates to the topic, that relates to science and data in marketing, etc. And so I'm really excited about it. And the thing that tells me that we've hit on something awesome and that we're doing the right thing is that in just the first week that we've had the Side Chat Facebook group up, we have we've grown to over 500 members already. We're sure to grow more in the future. We're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks or so different ways that you can help us grow, different ways that you can participate in the group. But again, I'm really excited about this new format, and I hope you guys are as well. Now, like I said, this week's topic is social calls to action. And social calls to action is one of the clearest examples of what I call unicorns and rainbows, right? It's the idea of using calls to action in social media is resisted by some of the strongest and most powerful elements of superstition and myth that we find in marketing today, right? Because nobody would have argued 10 years ago when we just, when we were started to getting good at email marketing, or however many other years ago when we were doing direct mail or television commercials or classified advertisements in the newspaper or heck, even telemarketing. Nobody in any of those formats would have argued about calls to action, right? In fact, when you talk about those kinds of marketing, or when marketers get together on Facebook, or wherever they hang out, or over a couple of beers, one thing that does come up a lot is a funny point, is that somebody will say, look at this terrible ad that I found, right? They'll post a picture of an awful ad in the newspaper, or somebody will describe an awful ad that they saw on television, or heard on the radio, or somebody called their house and tried to sell them something. And one of the things that marketers in the know will often criticize about these awful ads is that they lack a call to action, right? Because, hey, if you want somebody to do something, you have to ask them to do it, right? It just makes sense. I mean, even if you go beyond the marketing context, you go beyond just, I'm a marketer and I'm trying to sell stuff to people, you just think about your daily, your personal lives, your friends, your friendships, your relationships, your family. If you need help, or if you want somebody to help you out with something, or you want somebody to do something, one of the best ways to do that is to ask them to do it. Now, of course, it helps if you have a good relationship with these people, or if you have a good reputation with these folks, or different kinds of things about reciprocity. But the key of the whole thing is, very rarely do people do things for you without you asking them for it. And especially when you talk about the specific things, and when we're all raised, like I was raised, people would ask me, what do you want for Christmas, right? And I could have just said nothing, or not said anything, rather, and gotten a whole bunch of sweaters, right? Which these days I like, but back then, as a little kid, not so much. And so you learn, even as a child, that when you're getting birthday gifts or whatever, that you have to ask for what you want. But for some reason, when we moved to social media as marketers and as an industry, it became a faux pas to use calls to action. It became déclasse. It became uncouth. It became impolite. It became desperate sounding. You started sounding like a used car salesman if you do calls to action in social media. Now, to me, that is one of the best examples, one of the strongest, one of the most odious examples of unicorns and rainbows, superstitions and myth in modern marketing. This idea that for hundreds of years, marketers and advertisers have been using, and communications people who, not even communications professionals, people who communicate at all, have known that calls to action are key, right? But then suddenly we got to Twitter, and it became uncool to say follow me, or it became uncool to say please retweet, or it became uncool to say click this link and check out this product that I'm trying to sell you. Now, why? That's if I'm there's a balance to be struck there, of course, right? So I always like to take social media and relate it to a party, like a networking event is usually the best sort of way to describe it. And so you imagine you're at a networking party, and I've written a couple of books, and occasionally I'll bring them up. If it comes up in conversation, a topic that I've covered in one of my books, I might say, I'm not going to hold back on the information, but I'll say, I talk about this in one of my books, go check it out. Now, I'm not going to say that. That's not going to be the entirety of what I say. I'm not going to become a broken record where I just go buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. No. I'm going to try to establish myself as an expert, a thought leader, try to establish myself as having a reputation for knowing what I'm talking about, and then I might throw in a call to action or two. There's nothing wrong with that in real life, right? That's just how it works. That's just how humans work, right? But for some reason, again, when we went to social media, the unicorns and rainbows reared their ugly heads and freaked out about, calls to action and asking people to do things. One of my favorite experiments in the field of psychology, I found several years ago as I was doing research into various topics, was done by a researcher at the University of Connecticut. His name is Irving Kirsch. He does a lot of psychological research. A good deal of his psychological research deals with hypnosis and hypnotically suggestible people. Okay. One of the experiments that he conducted was that he took suggestible people, that is, people who can be hypnotized. And I don't remember the exact numbers of subjects used in the test, but pretend it was 100 people total, right? Suggestible people who can be hypnotized. When you go to one of those like stage hypnosis shows, the people who get up on stage, those are suggestible people. And so he took those people, he took 100 of those people, broke them into two groups, 50 people in group A, 50 people in group B. Group A, he brought into his office and put him under full hypnotic trance. I don't know, every time I'm on stage and I talk about this. In fact, I'm doing this right now, even though you guys can't see me. I'm kind of wagging my finger like a pocket watch, because that's the universal symbol for hypnosis, as is this spiral. But so he hypnotized these people, and then gave them a hypnotic suggestion, under full-on hypnotic trance, implanted a command in their head that was, here's a stack of postcards, 30 postcards, mail one back to me every day for a month. Okay? Then he sent them back out into the world and counted how many postcards they sent them. Well, dehypnotized them or took them out of hypnosis, whatever, and then sent them off into the world, counted how many postcards they sent back. Then the other group of 50 he took into his office one by one, of course, like the first group. And instead of hypnotizing them, he just asked them. He said, hey, we're doing an experiment. Here's a stack of postcards. Can you please send one back to me every day for a month? Now, at face value, right? If we weren't talking about social calls to action here, I would ask you, what do you think? Which group do you think sent back the most postcards? Most people would probably say the group that was under hypnotic trance, because we've seen people do crazy stuff under hypnosis, right? That's true. Hypnosis is real. I've done some research in it. I am fascinated by it. I cannot do it, but I'm, of course, fascinated by it. Problem is, it was that second group. It was the social request group that sent back more postcards. Social requests, especially when you do stuff like ask please and are nice and are some sort of authority figure, tend to work just as well as suggestions given under full hypnotic trance. Now, with the understanding that for hundreds of years, marketing folks and advertising folks, communications folks have been using calls to action. Many, many books have been written about calls to action, right? And you take that fact, that history, you apply the lesson we just learned from this experiment about the fact that social calls to action, social requests, do just as well as full-on hypnotic trances, and then you look at this situation that we're in today. We're saying please retweet, or please follow, or please like or comment or share, or whatever is considered uncool on social media, and the whole thing starts to get a bit absurd. We're marketers. We're doing this to sell product, to build reach, to sell a service, to build branding, whatever it is. We're in business, and we're doing this business to pay our bills through some business mechanism, through some business model. And that business model, that mechanism, relies on people doing what we'd like them to do. Now, you could take that to nefarious ends, in the case of, some would argue, gambling, for instance. If I'm trying to convince you to gamble, I live in Las Vegas, so that example always comes to mind. Yeah, that could be considered nefarious. Or, it could just be, people should buy this book because it's educational. That's not quite so nefarious. But the point is, social calls to action work. Marketers have a history of doing them for a long, long time. But suddenly in social media, we've heard that they're not cool to use. So, I dug into the data. And I've been digging into data about this topic for a long time now, for years now. Because again, it's one of my favorite examples of unicorns and rainbows, superstitions and myths. And what I did here is I looked at the word comments in blog posts. So I looked at a number of blog posts, something like 50,000 blog posts, and I looked at blog posts that included the word comment. Those are the yellow, or the orange bars there, versus blog posts that did not include the word comment. That is the gray bars in this graph. Now, for each of those blog posts, for each of those buckets of blog posts, the yes, they had the word comment, or the no, they did not have the word comment, I looked at 3 different metrics. I looked at comments as the first pair of bars, links as the second pair of bars, and views as the third pair of bars. Somewhat unsurprisingly to us, and by us I mean those who are interested in science and data in marketing, you find that when the word comment occurs in a blog post, that blog post has a tendency to have more comments than blog posts that don't have the word comment in them. Shocking, right? Ask people to comment on something, and they do. Now, the key here is, of course, don't just say, please comment on this blog post at the end and not give any context, not give any motivation, etc. The key is really to give a motivation. Why should people comment on it? typically, I mean, the most classic way to give a motivation a comment is, you know, what do you think about this, right? If I show you a piece of data, I tell you to try to do something, I tell you to experiment with something. I say, well, have you experimented with this tactic? Did it work for you? Has it not worked for you? Or if it's a controversial topic, what do you think about this? A good thing, a bad thing, that kind of thing. Agree or disagree. These are common ways to use explicit calls to action with motivators and not be so. It's pretty bald faced. I mean, because you're just asking people for comments, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as the reason you're asking for them makes some kind of sense. Right? But what I find most surprising, honestly, myself, because I expected to find that first pair of bars, right? I expected to find the blog post that included the word comment got more comments. To me, that's just sort of marketing 101, right? What I do find surprising is that the other two bars, those blog posts that included the word comments, had more links too, and they got more views. Now, it's surprising, I think, because as we'll see in other kinds of calls to action, sometimes calls to action don't necessarily translate across the spectrum of actions, right? And especially commenting. Commenting is a sort of special kind of social interaction in social media because if you put a piece of content up and I agree with it and I love it and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen, I'll like it, I'll share it, but I may not comment on it, right? Because I may not have anything to add, right? But if you put something up and I disagree with it and I hate it and it's the worst thing I've ever seen, I may comment on it to tell you you're wrong, but I'm probably not going to like it or share it. And so comments tend to be a little differentiated in terms of what motivates them and in terms of those kind of behaviors. But in this particular instance, we do see there is some relationship between using comment as a call to action and getting more links and views as well as comments. And then we will look at the word link in blog posts, and it's the same kind of graph that we had in the previous slide where the orange bars indicate that the blog post had the word link in them versus the gray bars indicate that those blog posts did not have the word link in them. And then each pair of bars indicates the number of comments that blog post got, the number of links, the number of views, or the difference from average, because you see the vertical axis here is a percentage. That's the difference in links that blog post got versus the average blog post on that blog itself, right? So I'm measuring the effect of, not just the raw numbers, because some blogs obviously get a lot of links no matter what they post because it's a very popular blog, and some blogs don't necessarily do that. So to normalize for that, I'm using difference from the average for that blog in general, like that blog post's difference from the average from the blog in general. What you find, of course, is that the word link, blog posts with the word link tend to have more links pointed at them than blog posts without the word link. But again, you see there's a relationship here too, because they get more views. I mean, and that's kind of expected, because if you have a lot of links pointing to your blog posts, generally some of them are going to send traffic, and so you're going to get more views. And you do see a little bit of a positive relationship between links and comments, but it's a smaller kind of effect. And I think that speaks to what I was saying before, in that commenting behavior and motivating commenting behavior is very different than motivating other kinds of social behavior. And I've talked about this in previous side chats when we've talked about comments and the sort of the science of commenting, because commenting is, I'm not a huge fan of it as a social engagement metric or as a goal for social media marketing, but it is useful in certain instances. And the most important thing we have to realize about it is that its behavior, or the behavior that motivates commenting, is very different than the behavior that motivates other kinds of social interaction. And then when we see the word share in blog posts across the board, blog posts that use the word share, that's the orange bars, versus blog posts that do not use the word share, that's the gray bars here, tend to get more comments, more links, and more views. And I think this is a function of, please share this blog post, essentially. And again, you want to use sort of motivators and reasons to use the call to action. Don't just say, please share this. But if you ask somebody to share a blog post, they're going to do it in a variety of ways. They may link to it, they may tweet it out, they may put it on Facebook, they may just email it to their friends, and all these different things are going to create more links because more people are seeing it. They're going to create more views because more people are seeing it, and they're going to create more comments because, again, more people are seeing it, because the more shares you get, the more attention you get on a blog post. And then typically the more attention you get on a blog post, the more of these kinds of interactions you do get. So To sum up the blog data so far, the word comment, the word link, and the word share. The word view wouldn't really make sense in this context. Please view this blog post because, well, you've already viewed it because you're reading the call to action. But those three calls to action do have a positive relationship to the social engagement, especially the specific one that you're talking about when you're talking about in terms of links and comments. But in general, just ask people to share stuff increases the amount of social interaction you get. And then when you switch over to Twitter, and you look at click-through rates. So if I tweet a link in Twitter and I count the number of people who click on that link, the number of clicks that link got, and I divide that by the number of followers I have, I get a kind of click-through measurement. It's not perfect, right? Because of course not everybody who follows me is A, even an active Twitter account, B, even a real person, and C, even probably awake at the time that I tweet a given link or sitting at their computer looking at Twitter. But it's some sort of measurement of click-through rate. And you look at parts of speech and their relationship to click-through rates, you find that when tweets are heavy in verbs and adverbs, they tend to get more clicks, as opposed to when tweets are heavy in adjectives and nouns. Adverbs and verbs. Well, verbs are action words and adverbs are words that describe action words. Using calls to action always include a verb. And they can typically also include an adverb, especially when you start talking about motivation. When you start trying to convince people and persuade people and sell people to use that call to action, or to accept that call to action, to be motivated by that call to action, you find that you'll be using a lot of verbs and adverbs, right? And so when you're looking at Twitter, when you're looking at click-through rates, and of course clicking is a type of social action, that kind of social action in social media is precipitated by using action words. So experiment with using more action words when you want more click-throughs. And again, I mean, this applies in a few other places too. In Twitter, please retweet is a call to action, right? And again, I've had debates with very well-known folks in social media, video debates with David Meerman Scott, in fact, about this concept of does please retweet work? And really, it's not generally a debate whether or not it works, because the data shows that it absolutely does. And in fact, in this case, I looked at tens of thousands of randomly selected tweets, broke them into 3 groups. The top bar is those tweets that included the phrase, please retweet. The middle bar is tweets that included the phrase, please RT. And the bottom bar there is tweets that included neither call to action phrase, right? And then I looked at the percentage of those tweets that were retweeted, i.e. got 1 or more retweets. Okay. What I found is that in the neither group, it was about 12% of them were retweeted. However, in the group where the tweets included the phrase, please retweet, it was just a tad over 50%, about 51% of them were retweeted, i.e. got 1 or more retweets. Meaning, tweets that include the phrase, please retweet, tend to be retweeted, are 4 times more likely to be retweeted. Now, of course, this is correlation, not causation. It does not prove causation. One could make a pretty strong argument for a causative relationship between the phrase "please retweet" and getting retweets rather. But this does not necessarily prove it because this is only correlation. But please retweet. I mean, it works, right? It's correlated. It works. Here's the thing: go to Twitter right now if you don't believe me. Type out a tweet that's good, that's interesting, whatever. Don't just spam Twitter. It's got some value to it. Put a link in it and just send that out, right? And then later today or tomorrow, or even better, next week at the same time, tweet that same tweet, post that same tweet, but include the phrase "please retweet" in it, and let me know what happens. I used to present this like most retweetable words list every time I spoke at various conferences or events and whatever, and invariably, I'd have somebody come up to me afterwards with their phone out, and they would show me it be like this gibberish tweet composed of all the most retweetable words, and it'd make generally no sense because the words, it's not a one tweet, it's a bunch of different words from a bunch of different tweets, but it has the phrase "please retweet" on the list, and often they would get retweets because it has the phrase "please retweet" in it. And then when you look at the actual number of times those tweets in those 3 buckets, again, "please retweet" versus "please RT" versus neither, get retweeted. So not just the binary, did it get retweeted or not, like the previous graph was showing, but in fact, how many retweets per tweet did it get? You find that the tweets with the phrase "please retweet" in them tend to get 3 times more retweets than even those that had just included "please RT." right? So calls to action work on Twitter. So far, we've shown calls to action work on blogs and calls to action work on Twitter. Let's jump over to Instagram for a second. You look at the most liked Instagram hashtags. That means when you take an Instagram post, you get the number of likes on that Instagram post, you divide that by the number of followers that the account who posted that image has, you get a sort of like rate. Again, it's kind of similar to that click-through rate. Right? And then you take each individual post's like rate and you compare it to the average like rate, like to follower ratio is another way to put that, as I do in this graph. And you look for the hashtags that are correlated with when they're on a Instagram post, that post has a higher like to follow ratio than the average. What you find is that it's a lot of follow for follow, like for like, follow the number 4, follow, like the number 4, like, L4L, which stands for like, F4F, which stands for follow, right? And follow back, tags for like, follow me, hashtag follow, that kind of stuff. Right now, I'm not going to vouch for the quality of the interaction, you're necessarily going to get with these kind of hashtags. However, using hashtags like this are a kind of social call to action. Specifically, a reciprocity indicating call to action. And that's one of the most powerful calls to action, not just in social media, but just sort of in the evolutionary history of humanity. That if I'm asking you to do something, there is an implicit or even explicit, in the case of follow for follow, indication that I'm going to do the same thing back for you. Okay, so we've proved on blogs, calls to action work, Twitter, calls to action work, Instagram, calls to action work, especially when they're of the reciprocity, of a reciprocal nature. Let's go to Facebook. Now, we'll start with questions. Facebook posts that include questions get more comments. They actually get less likes, right? Because the orange bar indicates Facebook posts that had a question in them. The gray bar indicates Facebook posts that have fewer, or that do not have questions in them. And then the three pairs are the number of the action rate, so the number of likes divided by the total number of Facebook fans on that page, or the number of comments divided by the total number of Facebook page fans, or the number of shares divided by the Facebook fan pages. That action to follower ratio, that action to fan ratio that we've used in a couple of places here. And what you find is that when your Facebook posts have comments in them, they tend to get, or have questions in them, they tend to have more comments. Lower number of shares, and there's some positive relationship, or lower number of shares and likes, but higher comments, right? Because again, commenting behavior is a little bit different than other kinds of behavior. And then when we look at specifically what kind of questions, you find that a should, would, and which get a lot of comments versus why and how. All right, should, would, and which are yes or no or multiple choice questions. Why and how, or you have to answer them, you have to type in an essay. Right? So implicit calls to action. A question is an implicit call to action. You don't necessarily need to say answer in the comments. Please answer this. You just ask a question, and by answering it, people are acting on a call to action. It's an implicit call to action. But then when you look in Facebook at explicit calls to action, that is posts that include the word like, for instance, and it's that same pairing where the orange bar indicates the post did include the word like, the gray bar indicates that those posts did not include the word like, and then each of the three pairs indicates the action rate for one of the three actions. So likes is the first pair, comments is the second pair, and shares is the third pair. Facebook posts that include the word like get more likes than Facebook posts that do not include the word like. Shock and surprise. Facebook posts that include the word comment get more comments than Facebook posts that do not include the word comment. And, but you can guess what this one's going to be, Facebook posts that include the word share get more shares than Facebook posts that do not include the word share. So we've shown that on blogging, calls to action work, and Twitter, calls to action work, and Instagram, calls to action work, and Facebook, calls to action work. And that's really the point here. There is very little argument that can be made against calls to action in social media. The best argument that you're going to hear, and the best I put in sort of scare quotes, is that it sounds a little desperate. Yes, a bad call to action, no matter the medium, no matter if it's on Twitter or on a direct mail piece, if it's bad, it's going to be bad. It's awful. But if it's good, then it works, and it's not bad. So the trick is not, the debate should not be, rather, do I use calls to action or not? The debate should be, what are the best calls to action? What are the slickest, what are the most motivated, the most persuasive, the most selling, the most enticing calls to action possible? Because it is those calls to action that will work best, rather. Although I don't honestly think the bar is really all that high just to find a call to action that works. So what we're going to do this week, we're going to jump on over to the Facebook group. Hopefully that's probably where you're watching this video right now. And we're going to have a discussion on Facebook. Feel free to ask your questions in the Facebook group. Feel free to answer the questions that we ask and that other people ask. I really want this community to be sort of a, sort of self-answering, self-building community, self-organizing community, if you will, because I think that is what will make this community very, very awesome. So thank you, everybody, for listening this week. We will have another Side Chat episode next Monday, and please feel free to invite a ton of folks in the Side Chat, as long as they're relevant. Don't spam all your friends or whatever, but invite folks in, have a great discussion, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, everybody.